All right, first things first, let's get some audience participation going on here. Who actually did chores this morning before coming to this conference? Who did chores? Right? All right, so who is planning their garden to grow food for their family right now, or going to be growing food for their family? All right. Who's going to be growing food for someone else's family as well? Great. All right. Now, who plans on eating today or wearing something? Exactly. That's the regional collaboration here. Every single one of us on a daily basis, whether we eat, whether we get dressed, and so many other resources rely on a farmer. It may be a farmer that we know. It may be a farmer from our region or our state. It may be a farmer from somewhere else in the world, but we're all relying on farmers every day throughout the day. And that's the bottom line here, that inherently agriculture and its products are regional, are global. And we need to keep that in mind because sometimes we start taking it for granted. But more and more, as we've heard this morning, as we're going to see throughout the day, and I think as we see throughout this year, next year, and this decade, we're going to be returning to understanding that better and having a more innate sense of that. So just quickly here, Glenwood was mentioned previously. This is a screenshot from their State of Agriculture for the Valley. It was an analysis of 2007 census. My apologies to Sullivan County representatives here. But the bottom line is, just to get a quick snapshot, we've heard a lot about decline. We've heard a lot about where we were and where we are now. What's very important here is look at this. I mean, this is where we're at. We're at almost, and if you put Sullivan County in there and some of our neighbors that interact in this, I mean, 1 million acres in farmland. If you look at individual farms, over 5,000. You start looking at the gross region-wide farm economic impact, getting up close to $1 billion. Direct sales, over $500 million. And the bottom line is New York and the Northeast is very competitively placed for direct sales. The Hudson Valley, including Sullivan County, plays a significant role in direct sales. Our farmers are selling directly to customers, and if you look at it statistically, and please take time to take a look at this Glenwood report in more depth, the Hudson Valley actually has a very large proportion of direct sales compared to the rest of New York State and also the Northeast, and that's important to think about. Historically, here in the Hudson Valley, we have been working regionally. This report came out years ago. We were part of it. American Farmland Trust really took an early initiative to say, what are the challenges for agriculture? I mean, this right now is coming up on its 10-year anniversary. And what's important about that is, yes, in New York and yes, in the Hudson Valley, we care about the soil. We want to preserve agriculture and the opportunity to be able to have somewhere to farm. But we also recognize, as Dave pointed out in the sustainability plan, that the farmers need to make a living, that protecting the soil is one step, and that agriculture is inherent as an activity, as a working landscape, and can contribute to that overall general picture. And so this plan was great because it identified 13 recommendations with implementable actions. And Hudson Valley AgriBusiness was actually one of those products that came out of it. And we inherently are working on a regional level. We have a relationship with Washington County. We're going to be finalizing one with Rensselaer County, Columbia, Dutchess, Orange, Ulster, and Sullivan counties. And we work directly with the offices or the entities that are focusing on economic development and bring agriculture into that dialogue and bring economic development programs, techniques, and opportunities to the aggregated food system, which starts at the farm, ends at the plate, or maybe on the shelf where you're buying your product from. But the bottom line is these programs are not looking at towns, are not bound by geographic boundaries of counties or municipal boundaries. They're really responding to opportunity and need. And often that crosses not only county boundaries, but even state boundaries. We've started exchanging with Berkshire County. Berkshire County chefs are taking 7 different Hudson Valley farms to the James Beard's house next week. mean, that's phenomenal. We're not paying, our farmers don't pay attention to those black lines on a map. They pay attention to opportunity, and they pay attention to market access, and that's really what we're focusing on with some of our programs. Hudson Valley Bounty, which was an initiative out of Columbia County, started with the Chamber of Commerce. Businesses saying, how can we interact with one another? It's grown now to be a recognized brand by Ag and Markets for the Hudson Valley. It has extended into Sullivan and even the capital region with Washington County. Currently has over 275 farms participating, actively updating what they have, what they're growing, how to get access to them, and over 350 restaurants, including wholesalers and distributors. And if you are looking for honey, if you are looking for maple syrup, if you're looking for wine, you can literally go on here and find access opportunities and market entry points. But more importantly, we're also holding events. We're trying to raise dialogue. We're trying to look at what the consumer can do and educate them to the role that agriculture and the choices that they are making minimally 3 times a day, some of us more. I tend to have some high caloric intake, so maybe 8 times a day I'm making a choice. But the bottom line is we need to think about that. And similar to green building access that we were doing in the 90s, where inherently we're deciding about light bulbs, inherently we're deciding about appliances, we now need to shift to say inherently we're making choices and we're socializing our children on those choices every single day. This is a great example of what's happening on the ground. Hudson Valley Harvest, you'll hear a little about them later. But the bottom line is you're talking about between 25 and 45 individual farms being represented by a label transparently on the label itself that identifies the farm, but also very coolly it identifies the food miles. It identifies where that food was produced and the number of miles it had to go to get in that package. And then you, as a consumer, start thinking about how many miles did it have to go from there to my store or from there to my restaurant. Really exciting. They're part of the Hudson Valley Food Hub that was funded through the regional council system. I know the governor put some press releases out recently where that played up also the Finger Lakes, Long Island, and Central New York on what's happening with the food hubs. But you know, these are things that are starting to get diversified access. Every one of the farms that are part of Hudson Valley Harvest also work in other markets. CSAs, farmers markets, their own individual wholesale. And that's what we're really talking about is how do we stabilize and diversify market opportunities for our farmers. And that can only happen as we start considering the role agriculture and our consumers have on not only a local level, but a regional level. We talked earlier, I heard the number of 22, 25 million. That's the direct access we have typically in about a 2-hour radius. We've taken a step to go a little further with Hudson Valley Bounty and look at what's our access in a reasonable day's drive for a business. Looking at someone like Ginsberg's Foods, Red Barn, where can they be drawing upon? And if you look at a reasonable drive of about 4.5 to 5 hours, our entrepreneurs, our food businesses have access to over 65 million mouths every day. 65 million mouths. And that's thinking about from Canada to Boston to Western New York down to Philadelphia. Dave mentioned how our infrastructure rivals some states. I mean, that region actually rivals international country market opportunities. And that's what we have access to serve, and we have access to invite into our region. And the last thing I'm going to talk about here is farm-to-table co-packers, because the efforts and the consumers are really important, but without the infrastructure, without things that we have lost inherently, and now I'm kind of eating my words because we're going back to that decline from 1910, 1940s, that very steep, precipitous graph that was showing the decline in farms. Well, if you look at the entire food system, we had precipitous decline on what farmers need to get their product from the field to the shelf. So not only do we need to be focusing on supporting the farms, but now we need to start thinking about the value chain and how we're helping with processing, distribution, equitable marketable opportunities. And Jim Hyland, who's going to be talking next, is doing a lot with that. But just very quickly, you know, we look at this as one of the nodes in a much larger system. We're not talking about a chain that's lineal. We're actually talking about something more like a tree with branches and roots and trunks. And that's what's so important here, is to think about it. This isn't simple. This is very dynamic. So I look forward to some dialogue later on today. I want to thank you all for taking the opportunity to come today. Your time is the most important asset that you have. And it's always empowering, because we're kind of in this big peak of focus right now. We've had NESOG up in Saratoga. We've had NOFA. We had Farming Our Future just last week up in Columbia County. We're down here at CRREO. I think we're showing that groups such as CRREO, groups such as mine, Sustainable Planning, OSI, Glenwood, Scenic Hudson, Clearwater. We have more support to garner this in our region than some states do in the entire nation. So let's show the rest of the country what can be done. Let's set a pace of leadership, and let's continue from here once we leave to make sure that we think about what's on our bodies and what's going into our bodies and who's producing that for us. Thank you. You want me to introduce Jim?
You want to?
Sure. All right. So a great friend and colleague, Jim Hyland's about to step up here. One of our poster children in the region, not only for Farm to Table Co-Packers, but Winter Sun Farm. New Paltz really been the birthplace and one of his hometown advantages. So bring home a nice round of applause for a local boy done well.